Imagine you're the guy every man in town is secretly afraid of. You don't talk much. You don't need to. You've been watching the house across the street for months. Not creepy, protective. Then Christmas Eve hits. She's locked out, freezing, alone. And her piece of shit ex decides tonight's the night he's coming back to claim what he thinks is his. This is the story of the night Adrian Vale stopped waiting and started owning. Stay until the end. Because what he whispered at that gate made a grown man piss himself and run. And what did he do next? Every man watching wished he was him. Drop a comment right now if you do the exact same thing. Comment, I felt that. If you know you're built different. And subscribe, because the next one's even darker. Let's begin. Christmas Eve always made Maya feel like the world had agreed to be tender without her. Warm windows, gold lights. She could almost taste it from the sidewalk. And there she was, in front of her own front door, holding 2 grocery bags that were cutting into her fingers, staring at a key that had just snapped off inside the lock like it had decided, at the worst possible moment, to quit on her too. She tried not to panic. Panic made you stupid. Panic made you dramatic. Maya had trained herself out of drama the way other people train themselves into confidence. She set the bags down carefully and leaned closer, breath clouding the metal. She pinched the broken key with her nails. Nothing. She tried tweezers from her purse, because she was the kind of person who carried tweezers and painkillers and emergency hair ties, as if preparation could prevent life from being cruel. The key didn't move. She tried the back door, crunching through the snow around the side of the house, only to find it bolted from the inside. Her landlord had promised new locks, but never came. Promises were like that. People said it when it made them feel like a good person, then forgot you were still standing outside. The wind sharpened. Snow fell heavier, fat flakes that stuck to her lashes and melted down her cheeks so it looked like she was crying when she refused to. Her phone screen blinked 6. No service bar strong enough to trust. She tilted it, trying to find a signal like she could bargain with the sky. The cold slipped under her scarf, finding a soft place in her throat. Maya pressed her forehead to the door, as if her body could communicate with wood. Please, she whispered, not to God, not even to the lock, just to the universe that always seemed to choose her as the example. A car passed at the end of the street, tires hissing over slush. Then the neighborhood returned to its holiday hush, the kind of quiet that made you feel like you were the only person left awake. That was when she remembered the house across the road. It sat higher than the others, behind a sleek iron gate and perfect hedges that stayed perfect even in winter. The windows were usually dark. Sometimes, very late, a single light would burn in an upstairs room, and Maya would catch a silhouette moving like a thought behind the glass. People in town said his name the way they said, "Storm warning, Adrian Vale, billionaire, investor." The kind of man whose photo appeared in business articles beside words like ruthless and strategic. The kind of man who didn't wave back when neighbors waved, not because he was rude, but because he seemed built from a different temperature. Maya had seen him exactly 3 times in 6 months. Once, stepping out of a black car, dressed like he didn't belong to the weather. Once, taking a phone call near the gate, his voice was too low to hear, and his posture was too controlled to be casual. And once, at the mailbox, when she dropped a package and he picked it up without letting their fingers touch, like contact might be a mistake. She told herself he was just private, just busy, just not interested in anyone who lived in a small rental with peeling paint, and a landlord who answered texts whenever it pleased him. But tonight, as her hands started to ache in that deep, dangerous way, Maya found herself staring at his gate like it was a line between survival and pride. No, she wouldn't. She pulled her sleeves over her hands and tried again at the lock until her nails bent. The metal bit back. Her knees wobbled. The world tilted slightly, as if the cold had reached inside her and loosened something important. "Get it together," she muttered. Her voice sounded small. A sound came from across the street, soft, mechanical. A click. Maya lifted her head. The iron gate of Adrian Vale's property swung inward with slow certainty, as if it had been waiting for permission. A figure stepped out into the falling snow, tall and dark against all that white. No umbrella. No rush. Just a man walking toward her like the weather didn't get a vote. Her heart kicked hard. Her first instinct was to straighten up, to look capable, to hide the trembling, to pretend she wasn't 10 minutes away from something worse than discomfort. Adrian stopped at the edge of her walkway, close enough that she could see the snow collecting on his coat, the sharp line of his jaw, and the calm in his eyes that made her feel exposed. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" He didn't say, "Do you need help?" Questions gave people room to refuse. Adrian Vale looked like a man who didn't offer exits when there was danger. His gaze moved from the broken key to her hands, to her lips, to the way she hugged herself like she could keep her warmth from leaking out. Then his voice came, low and steady, cutting through the wind like a promise. "My house," he whispered. "Now." Maya's mouth opened on a no. Pride rose up, desperate and familiar. She didn't take charity. She didn't want to owe anyone, especially not a man like him. But the cold had already taken too much. Her body swayed before her mind could keep up, and for one humiliating second she wasn't a woman with a plan. She was just someone freezing on her own doorstep. Adrian shifted closer, not touching her, not grabbing, just standing near enough that his presence blocked a slice of wind, near enough that the world suddenly felt possible again. "How long have you been out here?" he asked, quieter than the snow. Maya swallowed, hatefully aware of how her voice shook. "Not long." His eyes narrowed as if he didn't believe her, as if he'd been watching long enough to know. And that thought, him awake, him seeing, sent a strange spark of fear through her chest, mixed with something warmer she didn't want to name. Because why was he here at all? And why did his order sound less like control, and more like he'd been prepared for this moment? Maya looked at her useless door, at the drifting snow, and at the thin line of darkness between her and the rest of the street. Then she looked at Adrian Vale, standing steady in the storm as if he belonged to it. Saying no felt brave. Saying yes felt like stepping into a story she didn't understand. And yet as he held her gaze, his voice dropped again, almost gentle beneath the command. "Before you get hurt," he said. "Come." Maya picked up her bags with numb fingers, and with her heart thudding like a warning, she took one step toward the open gate, toward warmth, toward safety, toward the billionaire neighbor who spoke in whispers that felt like destiny. The moment Maya crossed the line of Adrian Vale's gate, the world changed temperature. Outside, the snow had been loud in its own way, a constant hush of falling and wind and her own thoughts banging against her skull. Inside, when the front door shut behind them with a soft, airtight click, the silence felt deliberate, not empty, curated. Like a place built for control and peace, a place where nothing unexpected was supposed to happen, except her. Warmth rolled over her skin so fast it almost hurt. Her cheeks stung as blood tried to return to places it had abandoned. She stood frozen in the entryway, snow melting off her hair and dripping onto a flawless stone floor that made her feel immediately out of place, like the mess she was had no right to exist here. Adrian didn't say, "Take your shoes off," or "Watch the floor," or anything that would remind her she was a guest. He moved with efficient focus, as if this was an emergency he'd trained for. He took the grocery bags from her hands without asking and set them on a bench. He removed her coat with a gentleness that was almost clinical, careful not to brush her shoulders too long. Then he pressed a thick towel into her hands. "Bathroom," he said, nodding down the hall. "Warm water. Sit on the floor if you have to. The tile's heat." Maya blinked at him. I'm fine." His eyes flicked to her fingers, the rigid way she held the towel. "You're not." It wasn't rude. It was simply true, spoken by a man who seemed to value truth the way other people valued comfort. She walked down the hall he indicated, towel clutched to her chest like a shield. The bathroom was larger than her entire kitchen at home, but it didn't feel flashy. It felt practical. Heat rose up through the floor the second she stepped in, and her knees threatened to give out from relief. She sat on the edge of the bathtub anyway, breathing slowly as if she could convince herself this was normal. She wiped her damp hair, rubbed her hands until the stiffness eased, and stared at her reflection, flakes still caught in her lashes, face flushed and raw, eyes too bright. A woman who had been locked out of her own life and rescued by a man she barely knew. When she returned to the hallway, Adrian was already moving again. He placed her bags neatly beside the kitchen doorway, as if groceries deserved dignity too. He'd turned on softer lights so the house didn't glare at her. He'd even set a pair of slippers on the floor near her feet, the kind guests wore in nice hotels. "Those are," she started. "Clean," he said. "If you want them. If you want, not you should. Do not do it." A choice offered like a quiet concession. Maya slipped them on, and her toes nearly sighed. The kitchen opened into a spacious, calming room. There were no loud colors, no clutter, and no TV blaring holiday specials. But there were small, human things. A faint smell of cinnamon that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. A bowl of mandarins on the counter, bright orange against the pale stone. A dish towel hanging slightly crooked, like someone had tossed it there and not cared that it wasn't perfect. And on a shelf by the doorway, a framed photo turned face down. Maya's gaze snagged on it. Not because she wanted to snoop, but because it felt like a confession. Someone had deliberately placed it there, and then denied it the right to be seen. Like Adrian, he couldn't bear the memory but couldn't throw it away either. She looked away quickly, cheeks heating with the feeling of trespassing. Adrian opened a cabinet, pulled down a mug, and filled a small pot on the stove with water without asking her what she wanted. For a second, irritation flickered in Maya, old instincts flaring. She was used to people assuming things about her, deciding for her, and telling her what she needed as if she wasn't capable. But then he reached into a tin, and the scent that rose from it made her chest ache. Not coffee, not generic tea, something sweet and spiced. Something that reminded her of being 8 years old with a fever, lying on a couch while her mother murmured in the kitchen, trying to make sickness feel less lonely. A drink that tasted like warmth and care, and the belief that you would be okay by morning. He set the mug down in front of her, steam curling up like an offering. "Drink," he said. Maya wrapped her hands around it. The ceramic was hot enough to force her fingers to wake up. She took a cautious sip, and her throat tightened. It was exactly right. She looked up at Adrian, startled. He was already turning away, rinsing something at the sink as if he hadn't just done something intimate. As if caring was a rule he wasn't supposed to break, and the only way he could allow it was by pretending it didn't matter. "How did you?" Maya began, then stopped. The question felt too pointed, too personal. Adrian didn't face her. "It helps," he said, as if that explained everything. Maya swallowed, the warmth sliding down her chest and settling somewhere deep. "Thank you?" He finally glanced at her, expression unreadable. "You were turning blue. Not romantic, not soft. But somehow it landed like tenderness anyway, because it meant he had noticed. He hadn't looked away." Her phone buzzed weakly on the counter, vibrating like a tiny panic. Maya grabbed it, relief turning into dread when she saw the automated voicemail notification from her landlord's number. She played it on speaker because her fingers were clumsy. "Due to holiday demand," the recording droned. "No locksmith services are available until tomorrow morning." Maya closed her eyes. Of course on Christmas Eve the world would decide she could wait. Adrian's gaze sharpened. He didn't ask about her landlord. He didn't ask why she was renting a place with a lock that could trap her outside. He just absorbed the information like a man calculating risk. "You can't go back out," he said. "I can't," Maya insisted automatically, because insisting was what she did. She didn't inconvenience people. She didn't become a problem. "I'll sit in my car, or I'll find a hotel. The roads will ice," Adrian replied, calm as a weather report. "Your car will be buried by morning. Hotels will be full. Power might flicker. And you're still cold." Maya opened her mouth to argue, but her hands betrayed her, trembling around the mug. Her body still hadn't caught up to her pride. Adrian's eyes flicked to that tremor, and something in his face shifted. Impatience, maybe, but not with her. With the idea of her forcing herself to be brave when bravery wasn't necessary. "Stay," he said. Maya's pulse jumped. Adrian, it's not a negotiation. His voice stayed low and even, like he understood how easily loudness could turn control into a threat. He wasn't raising the stakes to frighten her. He was lowering them so she could stop fighting for no reason. Maya stared at him, trying to find the edge of cruelty in his certainty, the hidden cost, the trap. But all she saw was a man who looked like he'd already decided her safety mattered more than her comfort with accepting help. And the strangest part was the house itself. The way the lights were softened, the way the air smelled faintly of cinnamon, like someone had tried to make winter feel kind. The way the guest slippers were ready, the mug was already the right kind of comfort. As if this place had been waiting for someone to finally step inside and disturb its perfect loneliness. Maya's throat tightened around words she couldn't shape. Because if Adrian Vale didn't do kindness often, why did he seem so practiced now? And why did she feel, standing there with warm hands and a full mug, like the real danger wasn't staying, but what it might mean if she did? Adrian didn't lead her upstairs like a host showing off a mansion. He moved ahead of her with the quiet urgency of someone guiding an injured animal. No sudden gestures, no unnecessary attention. Maya followed, slippers whispering over dark wood floors that looked too polished to belong to a life. At the top of the stairs, he paused beside a door and opened it with the same restrained precision he did everything else. "Guest room," he said. Maya stepped inside and felt her breath catch. It was beautiful in a way that didn't try to impress. Clean lines, soft lamplight, a neatly folded blanket at the foot of the bed. A little vase with winter branches that looked like someone had placed it there to prove the room wasn't abandoned. But it was abandoned. Not a single personal item. No book on the nightstand. No forgotten hair tie. No wrinkle in the duvet. It was immaculate the way a room is immaculate when it has never had a real person in it, only the idea of one. Maya turned slowly, the quiet pressing in. "Do you have guests often?" "No," Adrian said. One word. Final. Like a door clicked shut. He pointed to a closet. "There are things in there. For you." Maya's pride bristled again, sharp and automatic. "I don't need." Adrian's gaze held hers steady. "You do." It should have annoyed her. It should have made her dig in her heels and insist she could sleep in her wet sweater and jeans to prove something. But the warmth had softened her edges, and the storm outside made her bravery feel pointless. She nodded once, curtly, and Adrian left without another word, the door closing with quiet respect behind him. Maya opened the closet. A hoodie, thick socks, a simple t-shirt. Everything was folded with a precision that felt like control. And the worst part, no, the strangest part, was that it all looked like it would fit. She held the hoodie up, expecting it to swallow her whole like men's clothes always did. But the shoulders didn't look too wide. The sleeves didn't look too long. When she slipped it on, it settled over her like it had been worn by someone her size. Her skin prickled. That detail should have set off every alarm. Because why would a man like Adrian Vale have women's clothes folded in an unused guest room closet? Why would he have socks that didn't bunch and slide and a hoodie that didn't hang like a costume? She told herself it was a coincidence, a standard guest set, something left behind by a previous someone. But the room didn't feel like it had ever held laughter. It felt like it had been waiting. Maya changed quickly, pulling the warm fabric over her chilled skin. She dried her hair again, combed it with her fingers until it stopped dripping, then sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her phone like it could explain things. No new messages. No new emergency. Just the dull ache of her life outside this house, pushing against the quiet. She could stay in this room, close the door, and pretend she wasn't here at all. That would be safest. It would also be lonely. And for reasons she didn't fully understand, loneliness felt louder in Adrian's house than it ever did in hers. She found him downstairs in the kitchen, not in a dining room with a chandelier, not waiting with a tray delivered by staff. He was at the counter, sleeves rolled up, forearms bare, stirring a pot with slow, steady movements. Bread warmed in the oven. The smell of something simple and real filled the air. Garlic, onion, broth. It made him look less like a headline and more like a man who learned, the hard way, That hunger didn't care about your reputation. Maya paused in the doorway, watching without meaning to. There was a competence to him that wasn't flashy. He didn't slam cupboards. He didn't hurry. He moved like someone who expected to be alone, and had built routines around that expectation. Adrian glanced over his shoulder. His eyes landed on the hoodie, the socks, and her damp hair pulled back. Something unreadable crossed his face. Approval, maybe, that she'd accepted help. Or maybe something darker, like the sight of her in his clothes confirmed a thought he tried not to have. Better? He asked. A little, Maya said, then tried to inject humor into the silence because silence made her nervous. So this is the billionaire lifestyle. Heated floors and soup. For half a second, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not a full smile. More like the memory of one. His eyes softened and warmed, then the shutters came down again as if he'd caught himself. It's food, he said, like that was all it could ever be. Maya walked closer, drawn by the smell and by the strange comfort of seeing him do something ordinary. Do you always cook? Adrian set 2 bowls on the counter. When I need to eat, not when he wants to. Need, not want. Maya filed that away. He didn't ask her where she worked, who she lived with, or why she was alone on Christmas Eve. He asked almost nothing. Yet she felt observed in a way that was unnerving. Like he was reading the small tells she didn't even know she had. When her phone buzzed once, a random low battery alert, she flinched before she could stop herself. Adrian's gaze flicked to her hand immediately, sharp and precise. When she said, "Sorry," out of habit, apologizing for noise, for existing, his brow tightened as if the word offended him. "You don't have to apologize," he said. Maya laughed softly, but it was thin. "It's kind of my default setting." He didn't respond, but the silence that followed felt weighted, like he had thoughts he wasn't offering. They ate at the kitchen island, not across from each other like a formal dinner, but side by side with a careful distance that still felt intimate. Maya sipped broth, warmth filling spaces inside her that had been cold for a long time. She noticed the rules of his house the way you notice rules in someone's eyes. A hallway branched off to the west, darker than the rest. 3 closed doors. Adrian never looked toward them. Not once. He moved around that space as if it didn't exist. Don't pry, Maya told herself. Don't touch what you don't understand. Adrian had rules too, even if he never named them. Don't stand too close. Don't let your voice soften too much. Don't look at her for longer than necessary. And don't call her anything but Maya. No, sweetheart. No mistake. No nickname that would make her feel claimed or special. Just Maya, like a boundary drawn in syllables. Halfway through the meal, her phone screen went black again, completely dead this time. The battery icon didn't even flicker. A small, irrational panic rose in her chest. The phone wasn't just a device. It was her lifeline, her proof she could handle things alone. Without it, she felt unmoored, as if the world could happen to her without her consent. She reached for it automatically. Adrian didn't say a word. He simply slid something across the counter toward her, an extra charger, neatly coiled, the exact type her phone needed. Maya stared at it, then at him. Her heart thudded once, hard. Another prepared detail. Another coincidence that didn't feel like a coincidence. Do you? Her voice came out quieter than she meant. Do you keep chargers for strangers? Adrian answered too quickly. For emergencies. But he didn't look at her when he said it. His eyes fixed on his bowl, his jaw tightening as if he just revealed something he hadn't meant to. Maya picked up the charger, fingers brushing the cord. The warmth in her stomach shifted into something else. Curiosity edged with suspicion, suspicion softened by how safe she felt anyway. She plugged her phone in, watching it come back to life like a tiny heartbeat returning. Across from her, Adrian sat perfectly still, the posture of a man who could command a boardroom but looked almost tense in his own kitchen, as if the real threat wasn't the storm outside, it was the possibility of being seen. Maya glanced toward the dark west hallway again, at the doors he avoided like pain. Then she looked at the charger in her hand, the hoodie on her body that fit too well, and the drink he'd made without asking that tasted like her childhood. And the question pressed harder than the quiet around them. Why was he equipped for her specifically? And what, exactly, was he protecting behind those closed doors? His privacy, or his heart? The lights blinked once. Not a dramatic blackout, not a plunging darkness that made everything frightening, just a single flicker, a quick shiver of electricity that made the kitchen lamps dim and return, as if the house had inhaled and remembered how to breathe. Maya's heart jumped anyway. Her body was still tuned to worst-case scenarios. Adrian's wasn't. He didn't even look up from the sink. He simply paused, listening to the hum behind the walls, then continued rinsing the bowl as if power outages were a minor inconvenience, not a threat. Outside, the storm pressed harder against the windows, wind pushing snow sideways like it had a grudge. The world beyond the glass was erased into white. Maya tried to sleep. She lay in the immaculate guest bed with its perfectly smooth sheets, and tried to convince herself that warmth meant safety. The room smelled faintly of clean linen and something else. Wood, maybe, or whatever quiet smells like when it lives in expensive spaces. It should have felt luxurious. Instead, it felt unfamiliar. Her mind kept replaying small details like they were clues. The hoodie that fit too well. The charger he'd produced without hesitation. The way he watched her hands, her face, and her flinch but never asked for the story. She turned onto her side, stared at the ceiling, and listened. The house didn't creak the way her rental did. It didn't settle and groan like an old building. It simply existed, controlled and contained. The silence wasn't comforting. It was like being in a place where emotions had been politely asked to keep their shoes off at the door. Maya didn't know how to rest inside that kind of silence. After an hour of tossing, she gave up. She slipped out of bed, pulled the hoodie tighter around herself, and padded into the hallway. The carpet was soft under her feet. The air was cooler upstairs than downstairs, but still warm enough that her skin didn't ache. She moved quietly, not wanting to get caught wandering like a ghost in someone else's life. She told herself she was just getting water. But the stairwell drew her down, and the dim amber glow at the bottom told her she wasn't the only one awake. The living room was lit only by the fireplace. Adrian sat on the sofa, not scrolling on his phone, not watching late-night news, and not working on a laptop like Maya assumed billionaires did for fun. He was simply staring into the flames as if they were showing him something the rest of the world couldn't see. His posture was controlled, but something in the line of his shoulders looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally, it was like holding yourself together was a job you never got to clock out of. Maya stopped at the edge of the room, unsure if she should retreat. Adrian's eyes lifted immediately, finding her in the dimness as if he'd sensed her coming. He didn't say, "Why are you up?" He didn't tell her to go back to bed. He just shifted, small, almost imperceptible, and moved an inch down the sofa, making space on the far end. An invitation that would vanish if she named it. Maya walked in slowly and sat where he'd made room, careful to keep distance. The cushions were deep and expensive, swallowing her into softness. She clasped her hands in her lap because she didn't know what to do with them when she wasn't pretending to be fine. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. The wind rattled something outside. The entire world felt narrowed down to this quiet room. Two people awake when they shouldn't be, sharing the same darkness for different reasons. Maya broke the silence first, because she always did. "The storm's getting worse." Adrian's gaze returned to the fire. "It will pass." "I hate when people say that," Maya admitted, surprising herself with honesty. "It always passes, but sometimes it takes things with it." His eyes flicked to her sharp, like he understood exactly what she meant but wouldn't admit it. She searched for safer ground, something smaller. "Did you grow up here? With snow like this?" Adrian's voice was steady. "Not here." "Where?" He hesitated a beat. "North." That was all she got. But it was more than he'd offered before. Maya nodded, pretending the conversation was normal. "We used to get storms like this when I was a kid. My mom would make this drink." She glanced toward the kitchen. "The one you gave me." Adrian's jaw flexed, the smallest sign of discomfort. "It's common." "It's not," Maya said softly. "Not where I'm from." He didn't respond. The fire reflected in his eyes, making them look almost warm, almost human in a way the daylight never allowed. Maya let herself lean into the quiet. What was Christmas like for you? When you were young? A pause. Adrian's shoulders rose slightly, then settled. Different. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving, he said, but there was no bite in it, just a boundary. Maya stared into the flames, gathering courage for a truth she didn't say out loud often. I used to love Christmas, she confessed. Like stupidly love it. I'd get excited about lights and wrapping paper, and those terrible holiday movies where everyone magically becomes kinder. Her laugh was small. But lately it feels like a reminder of what I don't have. Like the world is holding up a picture of happiness, and asking me why I'm not in it. Adrian's hand tightened on his glass. Water, maybe, or something stronger. When he spoke, his voice held an edge she hadn't heard yet. Christmas is a performance. The bitterness in the words startled Maya. It didn't sound like someone who disliked holiday music. It sounded like someone who'd been hurt and told to smile anyway. She turned her head and studied him in the firelight. That's a harsh thing to say. It's true, he replied. People dress their loneliness up in ribbons. They pretend they're full when they're starving. They post pictures of perfect tables and perfect families and act like pain isn't invited. Maya swallowed. You sound like you've had a lot of performances. Adrian's gaze stayed on the fire, but his voice lowered. Everyone has. Maya could have left it there. She should have. Curiosity was dangerous in a house full of closed doors, but she couldn't stop herself. Not when his bitterness felt like a crack she could almost see through. Were you always like this? She asked gently. Adrian's jaw tightened. The silence stretched long enough that Maya regretted it. She almost apologized, again, almost made herself smaller to fix the discomfort. Then Adrian exhaled slowly and said one word. No. Nothing else. No explanation. No story. But it was the first honest thing he'd offered that wasn't wrapped in command or control. It wasn't a fact meant to end a conversation. It was a truth that admitted change. Maya's gaze dropped to his hands because it was easier than looking at his face. In the firelight, she saw it. Faint scar tissue across his knuckles, pale lines against skin. The kind of scar you get from punching something hard. Something that fought back. Billionaires weren't supposed to look like they bled. Something tightened in Maya's chest. That scar, she said before she could stop herself. Adrian's fingers curled slightly, as if hiding it. Old. Maya nodded, not pushing, but the question stayed in her head like a hook. What did you hit, Adrian Vale? And why? The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Maya shifted, suddenly aware she was a guest again, taking up space. She stood. I can help clean up. If you want. Dishes or no, Adrian said immediately. Then he paused. It was a strange thing to witness, a man correcting himself in real time. His gaze moved to her face, then away, as if he was learning how to speak without turning everything into an order. If you want, he amended quietly. The change was small, almost nothing, but it mattered, because it meant he'd heard her pride, understood it, and adjusted, not to please her, but to respect her. Maya felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. She nodded once. Okay, she whispered. I want to. As she walked toward the kitchen, Adrian stayed on the sofa, eyes on the flames. But Maya could feel the shift in the room. Two lonely people no longer pretending their loneliness was invisible. And beneath that softness, the question sharpened, curling around her like the storm outside. What had made Adrian stop believing in Christmas? And who, what, had given him scars he still tried to hide? The morning light in Adrian Vale's house didn't feel like morning. It didn't arrive with clattering pipes or neighbors starting cars or the muffled chaos of other lives. It arrived quietly, sliding through tall windows and spreading across the guest room like it had been instructed to behave. Maya woke under the weight of that silence, warm for the first time in what felt like weeks, and for one soft second she forgot where she was. Then she remembered. The hoodie was folded over a chair, the unfamiliar sheets, the faint scent of cinnamon that seemed to live in the walls, The fact that she had slept in a stranger's house because her own door had refused to let her in. Maya sat up too quickly, heart thumping as if she'd done something wrong. She reached for her phone on the nightstand and saw it fully charged. A small comfort. A small control. The screen lit with a new message from her landlord. Can't get anyone out till late. The lock may need replacing. Sorry. As if the word could fix the fact that she'd been locked out on Christmas Eve in a snowstorm. As if the risk had been minor. As if she hadn't stood outside long enough for her fingers to turn numb. Heat crept up Maya's neck. Embarrassment first, then guilt. The kind of guilt that came from existing too loudly in someone else's space. Late meant she'd still be here for hours, maybe most of the day. She imagined Adrian's expression, irritation, impatience, and regret for letting her in. He had offered safety, yes, but men like him didn't offer it for free. They didn't offer it twice. Maya dressed quickly, smoothing the hoodie as if wrinkles were a moral failure, and went downstairs. Adrian was already awake. Of course he was. He stood at the kitchen counter with a mug, hair slightly damp as if he'd showered, dressed in dark, simple clothes that looked expensive without trying. The storm outside had softened into a quiet snowfall, the world blank and clean. Maya cleared her throat. My landlord texted. Adrian's gaze lifted to her face, calm. And? He can't get anyone out until late, Maya said, wincing as she spoke, as if saying it would make Adrian realize what an inconvenience she'd become. He thinks the whole lock might need replacing. Adrian nodded once. No irritation. No sigh. No tight mouth. He nodded like he'd already accounted for it. Like this was simply the next fact in a chain he'd begun calculating the moment he saw her turning blue. Maya waited for the other shoe to drop. It didn't. She swallowed. I can go. I can find somewhere else. I don't want to. You're not going anywhere, Adrian said, voice flat and certain, like he was stating the weather again. Maya's pride sparked, the old reflex. Adrian, I appreciate it, but I can't just take up your space. Not like this. You needed help, he said. And you helped, Maya replied quickly. And I'm grateful. But I should compensate you. For the food, the everything. She hated how her voice sounded. Too earnest, too desperate to prove she wasn't a charity case. Money was the simplest language she knew for safety. Pay someone, and you owe nothing else. Pay someone, and they couldn't hold your need over your head. Adrian's expression hardened. Not anger, not cruelty. Something like offense. His eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time since she'd arrived, his calm felt sharp. I didn't bring you in here to be paid. The words landed heavy. Maya's stomach dropped, shame flaring hot because she realized what she'd implied, that his kindness could be bought, that it was transactional, that it wasn't real. I didn't mean, she started. You did, he said quietly. You just didn't think about what it sounds like. Maya's throat tightened. The room felt too bright, too clean, like her messiness had nowhere to hide. I'm sorry, she murmured. Adrian looked away, jaw working as if he was biting back something softer. Drink something, he said instead, gesturing toward a second mug already made. Already made? Maya's chest pulled tight again at the tiny, unspoken care. She took the mug and sat at the island, hands wrapped around warmth she didn't deserve and didn't know how to accept without paying for it. Adrian moved around her with quiet purpose, not hovering, not checking in. He gave her space the way some people gave flowers, carefully, as if offering too much would be dangerous. Maya decided she needed to do something useful before she drowned in gratitude. When Adrian stepped out of the kitchen, phone call, maybe, or checking something in another room, Maya stood and began tidying. She rinsed the bowls, wiped the counters, and folded the dish towel the way she'd seen him do it, careful and neat. It was a small rebellion against helplessness. As she stacked mail that had been scattered near the edge of the counter, she noticed something odd. Envelope after envelope with the same return address. Adrian Vale Foundation. The name repeated like a whisper. Maya paused. She'd heard the headlines about Adrian Vale, the ruthless deals, the cold negotiations, the way he'd bought companies and stripped them down like he was removing weakness. She hadn't expected philanthropy. She especially hadn't expected a foundation that sounded personal, almost tender. Curiosity tugged at her, sharp and dangerous. She didn't open anything. She didn't touch the seals. But she couldn't stop her eyes from scanning what was visible. One envelope had a printed line she could read without trying. Women Children Outreach. Winter Housing Initiative. Maya's hand stilled on the pile. A billionaire who funded women and children? It didn't fit the myth. Or maybe the myth was incomplete. She set the mail back down, heart thudding with questions, and turned toward the living room to straighten the blanket on the sofa. That was when she saw it. On the shelf near the fireplace, tucked just beside a simple candle, sat a small mitten. A child's mitten. Tiny, worn at the thumb. Soft, faded fabric that looked like it had been washed 100 times and still held the shape of a small hand. It didn't belong with the rest of the room. The rest of the room was curated and controlled, expensive and clean. The mitten was a relic. Maya stepped closer without thinking. Not touching, just looking. Her chest tightened in a way she didn't understand at first. Grief lived in objects like that. Grief hid in places you pretended were decorative. This house wasn't just lonely. It was mourning. Behind her, a quiet footstep sounded. Maya turned, startled. Adrian stood in the doorway to the living room, his gaze locked on the shelf, then on Maya, then back to the mitten. Something sharp crossed his face. Panic, anger, fear. So fast Maya almost missed it, but she felt it, like a sudden change in pressure before a storm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse her of snooping. He didn't shout, "Get out." His control was colder than yelling could ever be. "Don't touch," Adrian said. Maya lifted her hands instinctively, palms open, proving she hadn't. "I wasn't. I just—" His eyes hardened. "Don't touch what you don't understand." The words struck Maya in the throat. Humiliation bloomed hot, immediately. The reminder that she was only here because she'd been helpless. That she was a guest, not a person who belonged. That warmth could be offered and withdrawn at any moment. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered, voice trembling, hatefully close to tears. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to pry." Adrian's shoulders stiffened, as if he hated himself for the tone he'd used. For a second, his gaze flicked to her face, and something almost gentle tried to surface. Then he swallowed it down. He stepped forward past her, and stood by the fireplace shelf. Maya expected him to take the mitten away, to hide it again, to erase her from that corner of his life. He didn't. He left it exactly where it was. Like moving it would admit it still hurts. He stared at the mitten for a long moment, jaw clenched, eyes dark. Then he turned slightly, not looking at Maya, and said nothing at all. No apology, no explanation, no softening. Just silence. Maya backed away, heart pounding, and returned to the kitchen with the mug trembling in her hands. Kindness had brought her into this house, but secrecy lived here too, sharp enough to cut. And now one small mitten sat between them like a locked door. Something precious, something painful, something Adrian guarded so fiercely it could destroy him if touched. Maya stared at the steam rising from her drink and wondered, with an ache she couldn't name, who was that mitten for? And what had Adrian Vale lost that made him protect a memory like it was the last thing keeping him standing? The day moved slowly, like the world itself had decided to stay in bed. Outside, the storm had quieted into a soft, steady fall. Snow drifted down without urgency, covering the street in a clean sheet that made everything look gentler than it was. Cars were buried. The sidewalks disappeared. The neighborhood felt paused, as if time had frozen along with the air. Inside Adrian's house, warmth continued its careful work, thawing Maya's body while her mind stayed tense and alert. She helped where she could without being asked, wiping counters that were already clean, lining up shoes near the entryway, and folding the throw blanket on the sofa until it lay perfectly straight. She was trying to earn her right to exist in this space. Adrian let her. He didn't praise her, didn't stop her, and didn't tell her she didn't have to. He just moved around her like a man sharing a room with a skittish animal. Quiet steps, no sudden sounds, and respect for distance. They spoke in small exchanges, safe ones. weather, food, the locksmith delay. Nothing that touched the mitten on the shelf or the foundation mail on the counter. Nothing that forced Adrian to explain the grief she'd brushed against. By early afternoon, Maya's phone was finally alive again, a bright little rectangle of connection that made her feel less stranded. She sat at the kitchen island, tapping through missed notifications. 2 texts from her landlord, a promotional email, a voicemail from an unknown number. A couple of holidays had. Merry Christmas! Messages from coworkers she wasn't close enough with to miss. Then she saw it. Derek. The name hit her stomach like cold water. Maya's fingers went numb again, as if the snow had slipped back under her skin. There were 6 messages. Missed calls too. Her throat tightened as she stared at the screen, already knowing what waited inside without opening anything. She clicked the first text. Maya, I'm in town. It's Christmas. Don't make this weird. I just want to talk. A familiar script. The kind of sentence that pretended to be gentle while already pushing on a boundary. The second message came an hour later. I got you something. You'll like it. I know you. The third. You're not going to ignore me on Christmas, right? That would be cold. Maya's mouth went dry. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She scrolled with a reluctance that felt like dread. The fourth message dropped the sweetness and replaced it with guilt, like a knife turned sideways. After everything I did for you, you can't even answer? I'm trying to fix this. The fifth sharpened further. Stop acting like I'm the bad guy. You're the one who always runs. The last message was short, and that made it worse. I'm coming over. Maya's hands started to shake. Not dramatic shaking. Not shaking she could stop by taking a breath. Her body remembered Derek in a way her mind hated. Remembered the way his charm could turn to pressure. The way his apologies always carried a hook. She stared at the words until they blurred. Her brain raced ahead, imagining him at her door. Imagining him demanding to be let in. Imagining her locked out again, but this time from safety. She didn't realize Adrian had entered the kitchen until his voice came from behind her, low and steady. Who is that? Maya flinched so hard she almost dropped the phone. She turned quickly, forcing her face into something calm. No one, she said too fast. Just someone I used to know. Adrian's gaze stayed on her, sharp and quiet. That's not no one. Maya tried to laugh it off, because if she made it small, maybe it would be small. It's my ex, she admitted, then added quickly. It's fine. He's just dramatic. Adrian didn't smile. His eyes moved from the phone to her face, and something in his expression tightened. Not jealousy, not possessiveness, but recognition. Like he'd seen this pattern before. Like he could read it in the way Maya's shoulders rose and her voice softened to accommodate someone who didn't deserve accommodation. Let me see, he said. Maya hesitated. Shame flared. She hated the idea of Adrian witnessing this part of her life. The part where she wasn't witty and resilient but reactive and afraid. It's nothing, she insisted. He's just trying to get a reaction. Adrian's voice stayed calm, but it sharpened. He already has one. Maya swallowed and angled the phone slightly so he could see without him taking it. Adrian read the messages in silence. The air between them changed as each line sank in. When he finished, he didn't comment on Derek's tone. He didn't ask, why did you date him? He didn't ask, what did you do to make him like this? Questions like that always made women feel responsible for men's behavior. Instead, Adrian asked for one thing. Does he have a key? The question cut through Maya's excuses like a blade. She blinked, throat tight. He used to. Used to, Adrian repeated, as if testing the word for weakness. And now? I don't know, Maya admitted. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. I asked for it back when we broke up. He said he didn't have it. But he lies, or he forgets, or he keeps things just in case he wants to prove something. Adrian's jaw flexed. His gaze shifted toward the front of the house, toward the gate beyond the windows, as if he could already feel Derek approaching like bad weather. Maya tried to pull herself together. I'll text him. I'll tell him not to come. It's probably just... A sound interrupted her. Not a knock at the door. A heavier, more distant impact. A sharp thud against metal. The front gate. Maya froze. Her blood turned to ice so fast she felt dizzy. Adrian moved immediately, not panicked, not loud, controlled. He crossed the kitchen, tapped something on a wall panel Maya hadn't noticed before, and a security camera feed appeared on a screen. His home was a fortress disguised as a quiet museum. The gate camera filled the display. Derek stood there in a dark coat, hairstyled too neatly for a snowstorm, holding a bouquet of red roses like a prop. The kind of flowers men brought when they wanted to look romantic in front of witnesses. Apology theater, staged for whoever might be watching. Maya's stomach dropped. Her skin prickled with old memories. Derek's smile when he thought he was winning, his voice when he wanted her to feel guilty, and the way he could be charming enough to make you doubt your own fear. Adrian stared at the screen for a long moment. He didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed, like he'd expected the past to find her eventually, and was irritated that it had the audacity to show up at his gate. Maya whispered, barely audible, "Please don't." Adrian turned to her. His voice lowered and softened, the kind of softness that made commands feel like comfort. "Stay behind me," he said. The words wrapped around Maya like a blanket, and a warning at the same time. Her heart pounded hard enough to hurt. "Adrian," she pleaded quietly, "please don't make this worse." His gaze held hers, steady and unblinking. "I'm not the one who came here." Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to argue. She wanted to say she could handle it, because that was what she always said, even when handling it meant swallowing fear until it became part of her bones. But Derek was at the gate, and Adrian Vale was already moving toward the entryway with the calm of a man who didn't bluff. Maya followed a step behind, exactly where he told her to be, because something in her knew the truth she hated admitting. This wasn't just an inconvenience, this was a test. And as Adrian approached the door, his posture shifting into something colder, something sharper, Maya felt a second question rising under her fear, one that had nothing to do with Derek and everything to do with Adrian. Why did Adrian look personally triggered by men who didn't take no seriously? And what, exactly, was he about to do that he was trying so hard to keep quiet? Maya stayed exactly where Adrian told her to, one step back, half hidden by the archway that framed the entry hall. She could see the security screen from there, and could see Derek shifting his weight at the gate like he owned the snow beneath his boots. Adrian didn't rush. He didn't grab a coat in a panic. He moved with a calm that was almost frightening, slipping on a dark overcoat and gloves like he was preparing for a meeting, not a confrontation. When he opened the front door, cold air crept in, sharp and clean, reminding Maya how quickly warmth could be stolen. "I'll handle this," Adrian said without looking at her. Maya's mouth went dry. "Just don't make him angry." Adrian paused at the threshold, and for the briefest second she thought he might turn and say something reassuring. Instead he said very quietly, "He's already angry. That's not your fault." Then he stepped out into the snow. Maya watched through the tall front window as Adrian crossed the path with steady strides. The gate loomed between him and Derek, black iron lines cutting the white world into segments. Adrian didn't look like a man going to argue. He looked like a man going to end something. Derek spotted him and straightened, the bouquet lifted slightly like a shield. Even from inside, Maya could see Derek's practiced expression. The charming smile that never reached his eyes, the slight tilt of his head meant to look concerned. The intercom at the gate crackled. Adrian didn't touch it. He stopped a few feet from the bars and spoke in a low voice that Maya couldn't hear. Derek responded loudly enough that the sound carried faintly even through the glass. "Who the hell are you?" Derek demanded. Adrian's head turned slightly, as if measuring him, as if Derek was a problem with a simple solution. Derek leaned closer to the gate, smirk sharpening. "Where's Maya? Why is she there? Is she working for you?" The word, working, came out slick, dripping with implication. Maya felt it like a hand around her throat. That was Derek's favorite weapon, turning her into something cheap, something transactional, something that could be purchased and dismissed. If she was working, then she wasn't worth respect. She was a thing. Heat rushed to her face, burning. She hated that even now, in Adrian's warm house, Derek could still pull her back into feeling small. And she hated, most of all, that Adrian was hearing it. Adrian didn't react. He didn't flinch, didn't tense, and didn't give Derek the satisfaction of seeing a nerve hit. He stood perfectly still, the kind of stillness that made Maya think of a locked door, quiet, strong, and impossible to push through. Derek laughed, louder and more performative, angling his voice so it would carry. "She always does this," he called. "Maya always runs to someone richer when she messes up." The words struck Maya like a slap. For a second, her body remembered. Every time Derek had implied she was lucky anyone wanted her. Every time, he made her feel like she was a burden being carried. Every time he'd framed her needs as greed. Maya's cheeks burned. Her hands clenched at her sides, nails pressing into her palms. The old story tried to wrap itself around her throat. "You're needy. You're too much. You're a problem someone has to solve." She swallowed hard, fighting back tears she refused to give him, even if he couldn't see them. Outside, Adrian's head tilted the slightest fraction, and for the first time, something in his posture changed. Not anger. Cold. He spoke, and though Maya couldn't hear the words through the glass, she saw the effect. Derek's smirk faltered for half a heartbeat, then returned, forced. Derek lifted the bouquet, shaking it slightly. "I brought her flowers. Like a decent guy. I just want to talk." Adrian's mouth moved again, brief and precise. Derek barked a laugh. "Or what?" Maya expected yelling, threats, a scene. That was what men like Derek understood. A bigger man shouting louder. But Adrian didn't play Derek's game. He leaned in just enough that his face fell into the shadow of the gate bars. His voice dropped so low Maya couldn't hear a single word, not even a syllable. From inside, it looked almost intimate, like a whisper meant for a lover, not an enemy. Derek's expression changed. The smirk slid off his face as if someone had wiped it away. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed, calculating. He took a step back without meaning to, the bouquet dipping. Maya's pulse stuttered. What did Adrian say? What kind of words could undo Derek's confidence so quickly? Adrian straightened, then did something that made Maya's breath catch. He reached for the gate control panel. The iron gate clicked, and began to open wider. Maya's stomach dropped. Shock flashed through her. Was Adrian inviting him in? Was he really going to let Derek pass the boundary? Adrian stepped aside, one hand resting lightly on the gate as it swung, exposing the long private drive beyond. Cameras mounted discreetly along the walls, lights that shifted as the motion sensors caught movement, and the clean line of security measures Maya hadn't noticed until now. It wasn't an invitation, it was a demonstration. Derek stared past Adrian into the property, and in that look Maya saw the moment he understood what Adrian was. Not just wealthy, not just powerful, untouchable. A man with eyes everywhere, with records and resources, with the kind of reach that didn't require fists. A man who could make problems disappear without raising his voice. Derek's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He adjusted his grip on the bouquet like he suddenly didn't know what to do with it. Adrian said something else, still too quiet for Maya to hear. Derek's gaze flicked toward the house, toward the window where Maya stood. His mouth twisted, anger returning because humiliation demanded a final strike. He lifted his voice again, sharp and cruel, aimed like a dart. "You think he wants you?" he shouted. "You're just a Christmas charity case." Maya flinched as if the words had hit her physically. The insult landed on her deepest fear, that she was only worth saving when it made someone else feel heroic, that she was a temporary good deed, not a person. For one aching second, she believed it. Then she saw Adrian turn his head slightly, not fully, just enough to glance toward the window. Toward her. His eyes met hers through the glass. In that regard there was no pity, no amusement, no judgment. Only a promise, quiet and ironclad. "I will not let him define you." Maya's throat tightened around something that felt dangerously like relief. Outside, Derek's confidence was gone. He looked at Adrian again, and whatever Adrian had whispered earlier seemed to echo in his face. Derek stepped backward, the bouquet sagging. This is ridiculous, Derek snapped, but it sounded weak. Adrian didn't move, didn't chase, didn't raise his voice. He simply held the space like a wall. Derek turned and left, fast, boots crunching over snow as he retreated down the street, roses still in his hand like a prop he no longer knew how to use. The gate closed with a smooth, final click. Adrian stood in the snow for a moment longer, breathing steadily, gaze fixed on the place Derek had vanished. Then he turned back toward the house. Maya's heart hammered as she watched him approach, his face unreadable again, as if he'd put the cold mask back on the moment the threat was gone. But now Maya knew something she hadn't known before. Adrian Vale didn't need to shout to be terrifying, and whatever he'd whispered at the gate had been powerful enough to make Derek step back like a man who'd finally met someone he couldn't control. The question burned in Maya's chest as Adrian neared the door, snow clinging to his coat like ash. What did he say? And why did the way he protected her, quietly, decisively, make her feel both safer and more exposed than ever? When Adrian closed the front door, the house sealed itself again, warmth, quiet, and the faint crackle of the fireplace swallowing the last echo of Derek's voice. For a moment Maya couldn't move. Her body still felt like it was bracing for impact, like Derek's words had been a shove and she was waiting to hit the ground. She stared at the spot where Adrian's coat dripped melted snow onto the entry mat. Ordinary details became anchors when your mind wanted to spiral. Adrian took off his gloves slowly, fingers flexing once as if releasing tension. His face was calm, but Maya noticed the set of his jaw and the way his eyes stayed too sharp, scanning the room like he expected the threat to find a new way in. Maya swallowed, throat raw. "I'm sorry," she blurted. Adrian's gaze flicked to her. "For what?" "For that." She lifted a hand uselessly toward the door, toward the world outside. "For him. For bringing drama into your quiet billionaire winter wonderland." The last part came out bitter and self-mocking. Maya hated herself for still being affected and hated that Derek could turn up for 5 minutes and make her feel like she'd shrunk. She forced a laugh that didn't land. "I swear I'm not usually." "Stop." Adrian's voice wasn't harsh, but it was firm enough to cut through her spiral. He walked past her into the living room, and Maya followed because the silence was worse if she stayed behind. The fire was still burning, orange light licking the stone. The mitten sat on the shelf where it had always been, small and accusing. Maya stood near the sofa, arms wrapped around herself again. "He always does that," she said softly, more to herself than to Adrian. "He shows up like he has a right, like my boundaries are suggestions, and I let it get to me and I hate that I—" Her voice broke. She pressed her lips together hard. Adrian didn't look annoyed. He looked tired. Not tired of her. Tired in a way that felt like grief had been living under his skin for years and only now had something poked it awake. "You didn't bring him," he said. Maya blinked. "I mean, you didn't bring him," Adrian repeated slower, as if he needed her to believe it. "He brought himself." Maya's chest tightened. She searched his face for judgment, and found none. Only a kind of dark understanding she didn't want to be true. Adrian's gaze drifted toward the front window, toward the closed gate, as if he could still see Derek's smirk. His voice lowered, almost to himself. "Men like that don't stop unless someone makes them." The words landed with more weight than they should have. Maya stared at him. "How do you know?" It was a simple question. It cracked something. Adrian went still, like a man hearing a sound behind a locked door. His shoulders tensed. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in the reflex of someone who had learned to protect a wound by pretending it wasn't there. For a heartbeat, Maya thought he would shut down, turn cold, return to commands and distance, send her back to the guest room and let silence do the work of forgetting. Instead, Adrian turned toward the fireplace shelf. He walked to it with slow, deliberate steps, as if each one cost him something. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the tiny mitten without touching it. Then his hand lifted and closed around it carefully. Not like it was an object, like it was fragile, like it was alive in his memory. Maya's breath caught. The room seemed to hold itself still. Adrian held the mitten in his palm, thumb brushing over the worn fabric once, and when he spoke, his voice sounded different, less controlled, almost raw beneath the calm. "My sister," he said. "Evelyn." Maya's eyes stung instantly, even though she didn't understand yet. The name matched the envelopes she'd seen, the foundation, the photo turned face down. Adrian didn't look at her. He kept his gaze on the mitten, as if looking at Maya would make the confession too real. "She was younger," he continued, voice low. "Bright. The kind of person who could walk into a room and make it softer without trying." His jaw tightened, and his fingers curled around the mitten like he was afraid it might disappear. "She used to smooth things over. Everyone's moods. Everyone's arguments. She thought if she stayed gentle enough, nothing bad could reach her." Maya's throat tightened. She knew that kind of woman. She had been that kind of woman. Adrian swallowed. She met someone. Charming. Everyone loved him. He had that skill, making people believe he was good. Maya's stomach sank, dread forming before the story even finished. "And in private?" Adrian's breath came out slow. "In private he was different." The fire crackled. Outside, the wind sighed against the glass like the world was eavesdropping. "I was already building my company," Adrian said, and there was bitterness in the words now. At himself, maybe. "Already winning deals, already learning how to be ruthless. I thought power meant you could fix things." He finally turned his head slightly, eyes dark. "It doesn't. Not fast enough. Not in the ways that matter." Maya stood frozen, heart pounding. "She didn't tell me at first." Adrian went on, voice carefully controlled again, as if he was forcing the words through a narrow opening. "She made excuses. She said she was tired. She said she was clumsy. She said she was fine." Maya's hands clenched. The phrase felt like a knife. "I'm fine." The most dangerous lie. Adrian's gaze dropped back to the mitten. "By the time I understood what was happening, she was already trapped in fear. Not just fear of him, fear of being embarrassed, of being judged, of admitting she'd made a mistake." His mouth tightened. "Fear has its own locks." Maya's eyes filled. She didn't wipe them. It felt wrong to pretend she wasn't affected. "I hired lawyers," Adrian said, voice flat with old anger. "Investigators. I tried to pull her out with money and influence, like I could buy her safety. But the courts move slowly. People doubt. People ask what she did to provoke him." His knuckles whitened around the mitten. "And he knew how to look innocent." Maya couldn't breathe properly. "What happened to her?" she whispered, though she already felt the answer waiting. Adrian's throat worked. For a moment, his eyes flickered like the power had last night. "She's gone," he said simply. 2 words. Final. Like the lock clicking shut. Maya's chest caved in with grief she hadn't earned but couldn't avoid. She thought of the face-down photo, the empty guest room, and the deliberate silence of this house. None of it was emptiness. It was the aftermath. Adrian's voice dropped further. "The foundation is what I built after. Evelyn Vale Foundation. Women and children." He looked at the mitten again, and the firelight made his eyes shine in a way that hurt to witness. "It's the only way I know how to keep her from disappearing completely. It's my attempt to rewrite an ending I couldn't change." Maya stepped closer without realizing she was moving. Not too close. Just enough to be in the same emotional air. "I'm sorry," she said, and the words felt inadequate and true. Then, quieter, because this mattered even more. "Thank you for believing me without making me prove it." Adrian's gaze lifted to her face for the first time since he began. Something unguarded showed there. Pain, recognition, a kind of weary tenderness. His voice fell into a whisper, the same kind of whisper that had pulled her out of the snow. "I saw it in your face," he said. Maya's breath hitched. She didn't know what to do with the softness that followed, the intimate understanding between them that wasn't romance yet but felt like the beginning of something dangerous. Because now she knew the truth behind his control. It wasn't arrogance, it was fear of helplessness, and in the quiet after his confession, Maya felt the new weight of choice settle onto her shoulders. If she stayed, she would be close to the wound he guarded. If she left, she would be safe from it, but he would be alone with it again. Maya looked at the mitten in his hand, at the way he held it like it could cut him, and wondered which choice would hurt less, and whether Adrian Vale was offering her shelter from the storm, or inviting her into a life he'd stopped believing could ever be warm again. The storm loosened its grip as the afternoon faded, as if it had exhausted itself trying to prove a point. Snow still fell, but softer now, gentler, drifting down in lazy spirals instead of sharp sheets. The sky remained the color of unpolished silver. The world outside Adrian's windows looked clean and quiet, like a postcard that had never had to hold real fear. Maya stood by the kitchen counter, phone in hand, reading the newest update from her landlord with a tight, helpless frown. The locksmith can't come until morning. Earliest. Sorry again. She exhaled and stared at the word again like it might change. Sorry. 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 As if regret could warm your hands. Adrian was across the room, rinsing the mitten gently under a stream of water as if removing dust from something sacred. He'd placed it back on the shelf afterward, exactly where it belonged. He hadn't spoken much since the confession, not because he regretted it, but because there was only so much honesty a man could bleed in one day. Maya's chest felt full in a way that scared her. Too many emotions, too little room to hide them. She cleared her throat. The locksmith can't come until tomorrow. Adrian nodded once, already aware. As if he'd expected the world to be slow to help. As if he'd stopped trusting it long ago. I could go to a hotel, Maya offered quickly. The words came out too fast, too eager, like she was trying to erase herself before she could become a burden again. I don't want to take up your space, and I don't want to be a reminder of Evelyn. The name made Adrian's face tighten, but he didn't correct her. He simply looked at her, eyes dark, and for a moment Maya saw something fragile under the control, something almost like need, almost like loneliness admitting itself. Don't, Adrian said. One word. Not a command this time. Not a boundary. A request dressed as certainty because it was the only way he knew to ask without sounding vulnerable. Maya's throat tightened. Adrian, stay, he added softer, as if the first word hadn't been enough. If you want. There it was again. The corrected offer. The choice. Maya's pride wanted to argue. Her fear wanted to run. But another part of her, smaller, older, tired of being brave in the cold, wanted to accept warmth without proving she deserved it. I want, she whispered, and felt the words settle between them like a quiet promise. They didn't make a big thing of it. That was what surprised Maya most. No dramatic shift. No sudden romance movie montage with candles and music. Just life. Adrian pulled ingredients from the refrigerator and set them out without fuss. Maya washed her hands and joined him as if she belonged in the kitchen of a billionaire she'd met in the snow. They cooked something simple. Bread, soup, a tray of cookies that Maya insisted on because Christmas still deserved something sweet even if you were grieving it. She showed him how to measure flour without packing it down. He watched like he was learning an important rule. When she teased him lightly. See? Billionaire doesn't mean you can ignore basic baking physics. He didn't laugh out loud, but his eyes warmed, and the warmth stayed a little longer than before. At one point, he turned too quickly and dusted his sleeve with flour. A white streak cut across his dark sweater like a small rebellion against his controlled life. Maya's laugh escaped before she could stop it. Soft, real. You have flour on you. Adrian looked down, then back up. The corner of his mouth twitched. Do I? Yes, Maya said, laughing again, and something inside her loosened. You look human. Adrian held her gaze for a beat too long. I am. The words were simple, but they felt like an admission. Later, when the cookies cooled, Adrian brought out a small box from a cabinet. Inside were plain gift bags, tissue paper, tags, and a stack of cards stamped with the foundation's name. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just the quiet infrastructure of someone who gave without announcing it. We're delivering these next week, Adrian said, as if explaining a business plan. Winter drive. Maya touched one of the tags. For kids? For families? Adrian corrected gently. Some of them are temporary housing. Some are starting over. Starting over. The phrase hung in the air, heavy and hopeful. Maya helped him wrap a few small gifts, simple toys, warm socks, and books. It should have felt strange, doing charity work in a mansion, but it didn't. It felt grounding, like proof that money could do something besides build walls. Adrian wrote the cards with careful handwriting, his words minimal but sincere. Maya watched him pause before signing his name, like the name itself carried weight he didn't always want. As the evening deepened, the house grew softer. The lights dimmed. The fireplace kept its steady glow. They ate at the kitchen island again, not facing each other like strangers, but sitting closer now without either of them acknowledging the change. Maya found herself studying Adrian when he thought she wasn't looking. The way his gaze drifted to the shelf and then away. The way he listened more than he spoke. The way his hands moved with control even when doing something as simple as tearing bread. "You're quiet," Maya said finally. Adrian lifted an eyebrow. "So are you." Maya swallowed. "Not inside." Adrian's expression shifted, subtly. "No," he agreed. "Not inside." The honesty made Maya brave enough to open a door in herself. "I think I've spent years choosing smallness," she admitted. "Like, if I make myself easy, if I don't need much, if I don't take up space, no one can accuse me of being too much." Her voice tightened. It felt safer. Adrian's eyes stayed on her, unwavering. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, certain, and not performative. "Being seen is not the same as being taken," he said. Maya's breath caught. The sentence landed in her chest like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. Being seen, not taken. A difference she'd wanted her whole life but never trusted enough to believe. Later, they moved into the living room. A tree stood in the corner, small, minimal, and decorated with restraint. No flashy ornaments. No overwhelming glitter. It looked like someone had put it up out of obligation and then refused to make it joyful. Maya approached it slowly, drawn by the quiet sadness of it. Ornaments hung evenly spaced, most of them simple glass. And then she saw one that didn't match. Handmade. Slightly uneven. A small star with a name painted carefully on it. Evelyn. Maya's fingers hovered, then lightly touched it. The ornament rocked gently on its hook. Adrian flinched, a visible tightening of his shoulders. Then he didn't stop her. He stood still and let it happen, like permission was the only love language he could offer without breaking. Maya turned, eyes shining. "She mattered," she whispered. Adrian's jaw worked. "She still does." They sat on the sofa again, closer than the night before, the space between them filled not with noise but with shared quiet. Maya stared into the fire, then spoke without planning to. "You don't have to be alone on nights like this." Adrian's breath caught so softly she might have imagined it. His voice came out barely audible, a whisper meant for her alone. "Neither do you." Maya turned toward him. The air felt charged, not frantic, not dangerous, just alive. Adrian's gaze dropped to her mouth, then lifted back to her eyes as if asking permission without words. Maya's heart hammered. She leaned in, drawn by something steady and safe in him, something that promised warmth without demands. Their faces came close enough that she felt his breath and felt the heat of him. Then fear rose up like an instinct. Not afraid of Adrian, fear of what tenderness cost, fear of how quickly good things could turn into leverage, fear of waking up one day and realizing she'd built her hope on someone else again. Maya pulled back, shaking slightly. Adrian didn't chase. He didn't look offended. He didn't turn cold to punish her for hesitating. He simply held still, eyes steady, voice low. "You're safe," he said. 2 words. Not dramatic. Not a promise of forever. A promise for now. Maya swallowed hard, fighting tears. She nodded once, grateful and terrified at the same time. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet and patient. Inside, Christmas Eve kept rewriting itself, not into a performance, not into a perfect picture, but into something real and small and soft enough to hold. And as Maya sat beside Adrian in the firelight, she couldn't stop the question that curled at the edge of her hope. Would she let herself accept love without running? And when morning came, when the locksmith arrived and reality demanded she step back into her own life, would this warmth follow her, or would it vanish like snow the moment the sun touched it? Morning arrived like forgiveness. The sky was clear, bright blues spread thin over the neighborhood, and the snow that had looked harsh and blinding at night now glittered softly in the sunlight as if the world had been reset while everyone slept. Trees wore white branches like lace. Mailboxes looked sugar-dusted. Even the road, half-plowed and still quiet, seemed gentler. Maya stood at the guest room window with a mug warming her hands, watching her own little rental across the street. The front steps were buried again, but the door stood solid and ordinary, as if it had never betrayed her. A van pulled up. A man in a heavy jacket climbed out with a toolbox and a tired expression that said he'd been saving people from broken locks all morning. The locksmith. Maya's heart lifted and sank at the same time. Relief, first, finally, a practical solution. Then the quieter dread that followed. Once the lock was fixed, she would have no excuse to stay. No storm. No danger. No reason. Just a choice. She watched through the window as the locksmith knelt by her door, worked a tool into the old deadbolt, and pulled the broken cylinder out like a rotten tooth. He replaced it with something new, shiny metal that caught the sun. A few quick turns, a test of the key, a nod to himself. Done. The practical problem was solved. Now the emotional problem stood in the open, with nowhere to hide behind urgency. Maya set the mug down and packed slowly, folding the borrowed hoodie with care, smoothing the fabric as if she could return it without leaving fingerprints on Adrian's life. Her overnight things were minimal: her phone, a toothbrush, a hair tie, and the small pieces of herself she always kept ready to move. She expected Adrian to shift back into the man she'd assumed he was when she first saw his gait: distant, efficient, and polite. The kind of man who helped in emergencies and then erased the evidence that he'd ever cared. That was how life usually worked. People offered warmth when you were freezing, then acted embarrassed once you stopped trembling. Maya carried her little stack of folded clothes downstairs, heart thudding too hard for such a quiet house. Adrian was waiting near the bottom of the stairs, hands in his pockets, shoulders set in that controlled way he wore like armor. But there was something different in his face, less shut down, more braced, like a man about to gamble on honesty, and unsure if the odds favored him. "Maya," he said, just her name, but softer than before. She forced a small smile. "The locksmith is here. He's fixing it now." Adrian nodded once. "Good." Maya hesitated. "I'll be out of your hair soon." Something flickered in Adrian's gaze at the phrase. "Out of your hair." Like he wanted to correct it but didn't know how without revealing too much. He didn't move out of her way. He didn't usher her toward the door. He simply stood there, letting the moment be what it was. Maya clutched the folded hoodie a little tighter. I want to thank you," she said, and felt her throat tighten with how inadequate the words were. "Not just for letting me in, for everything." Adrian's expression remained composed, but his eyes sharpened in attention. He listened like he didn't want to miss a single syllable. Maya took a breath. "Last night, when Derek said those things, when he tried to make me feel like I was nothing," her voice wavered, "I realized I've been living like that for a long time. Like I'm lucky anyone tolerates me. Like I should be grateful even when I'm disrespected." She swallowed. "He made me feel less than for so long, I forgot what normal respect feels like." The confession left her raw, exposed in a way she usually avoided. She waited for pity, for awkward discomfort, for a man to say, "You're too sensitive," or "Why did you stay?" or "You should have handled it differently." Adrian's jaw tightened, anger flashing, but not at her. "Then he doesn't get to speak into your life anymore," he said. The sentence was simple, but it hit Maya like a door opening. She blinked. "It's not that easy." Adrian's gaze held hers steady. "It is if you decide it is." Maya's chest ached. Deciding. She'd spent so long letting other people decide what she deserved. Outside, the locksmith finished and carried his toolbox back to the van. The new key turned smoothly in her lock. A clean, satisfying click echoed faintly through the crisp air. Maya should have felt only relief. Instead, she felt a quiet grief at the thought of leaving this house, the warmth, The silence that had stopped feeling sharp and started feeling safe, and the man who had protected her without turning it into a spectacle. She stepped toward the entryway, slipped her boots on, and wrapped her scarf around her neck. The house smelled like cinnamon and clean air, and the memory of it settled into her bones like something she would crave later. She opened the front door. Cold air rushed in, bright and alive. Maya turned back, expecting Adrian to stand behind her like a host, waiting for the goodbye to be finished. He was closer than she expected, not invading her space, just present. "Maya," he said again. She paused, hand on the doorframe. "Yes?" Adrian didn't reach for her. He didn't grab her wrist. He didn't block her exit. He respected the boundary the way a man should, by keeping her freedom intact. But his voice carried weight when he spoke. "I meant what I said last night," he told her. "You're safe." Maya's throat tightened. She forced herself to ask the question that mattered, the one that could either soothe her or shatter her. "Safe here?" she asked. Adrian's eyes darkened, not with possessiveness, but with sincerity. His voice went soft, controlled, and real. "With me," he said. "If you want that." No grand declaration. Not forever. No label was forced into the space between them. Just an offer. And embedded inside it was the rarest thing Maya had ever been given, a way out. A choice that didn't come with punishment if she said no. Love that was safe always left the door unlocked. Maya blinked fast, eyes stinging. She nodded once, small but certain, because something in her had shifted overnight. She didn't feel like a charity case in his house. She felt like a person. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something cold and familiar. Her spare key, the one she'd kept on a separate ring like a tiny insurance policy against being locked out again. Maya stepped forward and placed it in Adrian's palm. His hand closed around it slowly, as if he understood the weight of what she was giving him wasn't metal. It was trust. Then, Maya's voice trembled, but she steadied it with a thin smile. "Knock." Adrian's brow lifted slightly. Maya looked up at him, braver now, teasing to cover the tenderness. "Next time you watch me from your window." For the first time, Adrian's mouth twitched into something that was almost a smile, something real trying to exist on his face. His gaze held hers, and the warmth there made Maya's chest ache in the best way. "I wasn't watching," he said quietly. Maya's breath caught. He lowered his voice into the same low tone that had pulled her out of the snow, the whisper that felt like a promise. "I was waiting." The words sank into Maya slowly, blooming with meaning she didn't have time to unpack. Waiting. For what? For her? For someone? For a chance to not be alone? Maya stepped back into the cold, the sun bright on the snow. She crossed the street toward her little rental, boots crunching, breath puffing white. The world looked exactly the same houses, same quiet road, same winter air. But she didn't feel alone inside it. At her door, she inserted the new key and turned it. The lock clicked open smoothly, like it had never betrayed her. Maya paused on the threshold and looked back. Adrian stood on his porch, hands still in his pockets, coat open to the cold as if he didn't mind it. He wasn't watching like a guard. He was watching like a man learning to hope without punishment, like a man allowing himself to want something without believing it would be taken away. Maya lifted her hand in a small wave. Adrian didn't wave back the way neighbors did. He simply nodded, and the gesture felt more intimate than any performance. Maya stepped inside her home and closed the door behind her. The heater hummed. The air smelled like her own life, laundry detergent, old books, and the faint trace of last week's coffee. She leaned her forehead against the door for a moment, eyes closing. Across the street, in a house that had been too quiet for too long, a man held her spare key like it was proof that waiting could turn into something real. And in the soft space between them, a new question began to form, gentle, dangerous, and full of sequel potential. How long had Adrian Vale been waiting? And what had he noticed about Maya long before she ever got locked out in the snow? If this story made you feel that kind of safety that doesn't come with a price, hit like, comment. I choose safe. If you've ever been strong for too long and needed someone to show up quietly and subscribe, because the next story starts with a late night knock.